So gut health is one of the principles really behind the machine that you created. Talk about how that works. You mentioned HCl, which is the acid in our stomach. Just talk about how the machine can help restore the gut, because I think that's where so much of our healing can actually start.
Right, and I believe all disease starts with a problem in the gut anyways, because 70 to 80% of our immune function is tied to gut health. People don't think that, people don't understand that. They think leaky gut and maybe something's coming down your leg, right? Leaky gut, or who knows what that even means. What's a leaky gut, I mean, just like gut stuff, it's just a weird term for it. But what really is happening is you have the wrong bacteria. So you have aerobic microflora and anaerobic. When someone takes an antibiotic, for instance, and I believe there's overuse of antibiotics. I think if there's a bacterial infection that's life-threatening, you need to take an antibiotic, period. If you have the flu, an antibiotic is going to do nothing for you, because antibiotics don't touch viruses. So if it's a viral infection, it's a waste, but you've destroyed your gut. If it's a bacterial infection that you can't get a hold of through silver, through other things, through sleeping, vitamin C, whatever, then you need to take an antibiotic. Especially lung issues, because they can go awry very quickly, right? But unless you have a life-threatening bacterial infection, really, we don't need antibiotics. And that's why I use the word overuse. I'm not saying antibiotics are evil, because they're not. I think there's overuse of them. But once someone takes an antibiotic, they need to specifically rebuild their gut flora and fauna, because if they do not, they'll be functioning on 20% immune. So, and people are walking around, most people are walking around with 20 to 30% immune function. And they're seemingly doing okay, but the problem is after a while, the body can't keep up. So the water coming out of the machine that I developed has a negative 400 millivolts, the ORP value, or the electrical potential. We know, like I said earlier, through study, that the closer we get to a negative 300, negative 400 millivolts in the tissue itself in the intestinal tract, it will selectively stimulate anaerobic microflora, which is the good bacteria we need to reestablish the biome, reestablish the terrain. It's like, I say it like this, because this is very, very foreign to most people. Most people think you have to take a probiotic, or, we've had people do fecal implants, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff you can do to reintroduce good bacteria. The problem is, it's like if we went to a forest and burned it down, but we were kind and we took the animals out first. And then we just put the animals back. Are they going to live there in a burned down forest? Or are they going to wait for the foliage to come back so they have a place to hide, a place to live, a place to exist? Of course, they're not going to live in a burned forest. They're going to wait till it grows something so they have a home again. It's no different than bacteria in our gut. There needs to be flora and fauna. There needs to be an environment, a home. It needs to be inviting to them. And so I also use an example as an aquarium. If the aquarium water gets out of balance, the first signs are algae growth. But where'd the algae come from? It isn't like you did an implant of algae in the tank.
Right.
Where'd it come from? Well, we need to understand that everything is in the water, positive or negative. And what happens is if the water gets out of balance, then other things start growing. If we balance the water back, then the algae goes away. Chemistry. Well, the same is true in our gut. If we put an antibiotic in our body and destroy the environment, well, then something else can live there. There are other things that like a burned out forest, right? But that's not what we want. We want the healthy forest for the healthy bacteria. We don't want aerobic microflora. And so what really happens is improper fermentation in the gut. It's no different if you're making any fermented drink and you have the wrong fermentation. Well, the wrong bacteria gets in there, you could harm someone. But if the fermentation process is protected and proper and all the parameters are met, then it can be a good drink for someone, right? But you could harm them or help them. It depends on the bacteria that you're allowing to grow in it. So when we get the tissue itself in the milieu or the intestinal lining to a negative 400 millivolts, anaerobic microflora is very happy and wants to live there. That's when we restore gut. So purposely, we make the machine where the water coming out of it not only is filtered, not only has hydrogen gas dissolved, but now also has a negative ORP value, or what's called oxidation reduction potential of water, electrical potential. So we know that that's going to stimulate rapidly anaerobic microflora. Now, we can outpace an antibiotic. We can grow good bacteria faster than you can kill it with an antibiotic. We've done it. So this is very good for people. And we've even had some people that are gluten and dairy intolerant. Within 2 weeks of drinking our water, they can be eating gluten and dairy without inflammation. So this is huge. Wow. And I'm not saying you should eat gluten and dairy, but I'm saying you should be able to. The body is designed to process those food types. You know, if you want to have a donut once a year, you know, an organic one. We found one here in LA. There's an organic donut place. Robert and I, we got to go and take a picture of an organic donut, right? But that's not an everyday thing. Right. You know, that's just a treat, right? That's a special thing. But the reality is, it's easier than people think to restore gut function. But it's about chemistry. It's not about buying hundreds and hundreds of dollars of products necessarily. And there's nothing wrong with products that work, but the body can do it on its own. And that's what we need to understand, the chemistry of the body and how the body functions. So the problem comes when people have a gut that's disrupted. All of a sudden they start craving things that support the wrong bacteria, and they wonder why all of a sudden they're eating things they haven't normally used to eat or whatever, and they want it really bad. It's because the gut bacteria is going, we need food. Bring it on down. So this is what we do. This is why the water helps. Of course, you're hydrating the person as well, because we've cleaned the water and the body won't reject the water because it doesn't have toxins in it. So proper hydration has a myriad of benefits. You know, back from Dr. Batman-Gelid's book, Your Body's Many Cries for Water, right? Dehydration is one of the significant issues in our society. The last study I read, 4,000 individuals, 6 to 19, 54.5% of the population were chronically dehydrated. So, I mean, that's going to increase cancer. That's going to increase metabolic issues. You're going to have low energy. I mean, you're not going to get the toxins out. You're not going to have elimination pathways open. So drinking water in general is very, very therapeutic. Having water that has hydrogen in it will help neurologic, because as soon as the water hits the stomach, you stimulate gastric ghrelin. You have ghrelin and leptin, master hormones. But the ghrelin goes to the hippocampus, hypothalamus, and brainstem to help people with autism, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. And this is a double-blind study that we're talking about. This isn't just Paul Barattiero. This is neurologic. Many studies have been done on neurologic benefits. We actually in our offices have a brain mapping. You can put a cap on their head and you can watch within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, the brain completely change when they drink 16 ounces of water. Huge, huge benefits. So it's very far-reaching. But Scott, the reality is this. The creator, the original architect of our body, who's much smarter than all of us, created a hydrogen generator in our body, and that's our gut. If we have the right bacteria, if we're eating fiber-rich foods, if we're eating foods that are broken down into short-chain fatty acids, medium-chain fatty acids, the bacteria consumes those things and releases hydrogen as a byprocess. We call them farts, right? All 14-year-olds know all about it. The reality is, when we have the wrong bacteria, we don't fart anymore. We don't have a lot of flatulence, because we should be producing hydrogen in our gut, and we can produce 10 to 12 liters of hydrogen gas per day through the fermentation, and that's how we would normally be getting hydrogen. One of the mechanisms to get hydrogen into the body. We don't need a lot of hydrogen. We just need it in our body. So whether it's glyphosate or other things that can disrupt gut function that we now know, whatever it is, it disrupts immune function, it disrupts hydrogen production, all of these natural things. And we don't need, like I said, tons of hydrogen. 0.1 parts per million had benefits neurologically. 0.1 part per million. Now we put 1 part per million in our water. 0.1 parts per million, tenth of that, can stimulate ghrelin to the brain and greatly help bipolar, schizophrenia. I mean, we have studies on all of these disease models. So we don't need a ton of hydrogen. We just need hydrogen because it's signal modulation. You know, catalase upregulation, many enzyme actions in the body are programmed by hydrogen. Fatigue with athletes. We have another study on fatigue and pro soccer players. When they drank the water with hydrogen 30 minutes before a game, no fatigue. And that was because of catalase upregulation and no lactase buildup in the muscles. Because the body, now I believe what's happening is ATP. The mitochondrial function has been regulated and you're efficiently producing ATP. So you're not having to carb load, sugar load to get that energy that your body is now able to produce, because eating sugar and carbs produces oxygen radicals in the mitochondria. So it creates a win-lose, right? You win because you have energy immediately. You lose because now you have oxygen radicals, hydroxyl radicals in the mitochondrial respiratory chain. And so you don't have the energy production, and then boom, you know, you fatigue faster. If we can get that athlete off carb loading and sugar loading and have proper ATP production, they can last longer on the field. And so that's what hydrogen does. Hydrogen regulates catalase and therefore mitochondrial function and lactase buildup is lessened. So, I mean, I find these things fascinating. Yeah. But again, it just points back to the creator. It just points back to the way the body's supposed to function. You know, it used to be many, many years ago, we played sports and people didn't wear out in one inning. People could go and go and go and go. You know, I wonder why we have in the Olympics, the Africans are always outrunning everybody, right? Well, I'm sure they have better gut bacteria. And I'm sure they're producing, you know, not sugar loading, right? They're able to last longer. But, you know, it fascinates me, all of this. And the fact that it can go right back to nature, goes right back to the way the body should be functioning in the first place, to me, I find beautiful.